and welcome to Chapter 12. In Chapter 12, we're going to continue working through our DOM with different document nodes, and then we're also going to play with some style sheets and play around with those in our JavaScript. Let's get started. First thing we need to explain is what is a node. A node is technically a piece of the hierarchical structure. Everything in JavaScript, everything in HTML is technically based on individual nodes. The document node has inside of it an HTML node, and inside that node we have a head and a body node. Inside those are more nodes. Each is part of the structure. So each tag, each attribute, each text, everything in there is all different nodes, whether it's something tangible that you can see or whether it's just an extra piece of information. They're not just elements. You can also have attributes as nodes, and you can have individual text without it being an element as a node. So be aware, nodes are not just elements. They are everything that builds up the entire DOM or the entire document model. The structure that we call it is called a tree, and it starts with a root and moves its way through. The HTML node for the DOM is generally considered the root node. It is the first node. It is the start of the tree, the starting point of all the HTML elements. And you can see that each node has relationships. It can have a parent, it can have children, it can have an individual child, and it can have siblings. So this is the different relationships that you can have with nodes. They can also have different expressions or properties that go along with them. So if you look at the example that's given here, we have the HTML as our base root node. Inside that is our head with our title in it. And then after our head, the sibling is a body. The body has an H1 that has a text of Department of History. It has a paragraph. Inside the paragraph has a node for the word the, a node for the bold, and then inside of the bold is a string, and then the remainder string of online. So this is the different node structures that you can use. You can refer to individual items from their node position. So you can say, give me the first child of my node, give me the sibling of my node, give me the parent of my node, give me the last child of my node. You can also specify that I only want the element children. I don't want anything that's not an element. So I can say, give me all of my children, or give me my first element child, so on and so forth. Children generally returns only elements. So you can get your first child, which may not be an element, or you can get the entire collection of children, and then you can loop through it the way we do with arrays. One thing to remember, the older browsers, i.e. Before probably the last 4 or 5 years, their node counts would be a little bit different. So line returns would not be included as a node, whereas they are now, or vice versa. I can't entirely remember which. But be aware, you can't always be guaranteed, just because you wrote something a certain way, that node 3 is going to always be the same thing. That's the reason why we refer to which child is it, first child, last child, or siblings of other children, and we loop through them. But we try to refrain from just hard coding in node element 3, so on and so forth. Okay. The first thing we do with any project is go ahead and add in our CSS and our scripting files that we need. So we can see over here that we have an outline CSS that isn't already added, so we want to make sure we add that one. And we have the outline.js file that we're going to be adding as a script. So first thing we do, outline.css, and our script file. Our source is going to equal our BC outline.js. We're going to run it asynchronously and add in our script file. Cool. So let's go look at our script file. Script file right now is going to tell us that we're going to be making 2 different functions, our make outline function and our create list function. When we go to make our outline function, because that's going to be the first one. That's actually going to be our onload event that we need for our project. Because remember, when you have a script, you need to tell it to get started, and just making a function is not going to be enough. So I'm going to go ahead and start with window, add event listener, load, and we're going to call make outline. Okay, so let's go make our function. Okay, inside of our make outline function, I'm going to need two variables. The two variables are going to be the two sections of the project. In the HTML page, if I just flip back over there real quick, you'll see that we have the aside here that's going to be the outline. This is going to be our nav bar, and it's going to break down the Constitution into its different headers. The document, or the source document, is this side over here. So you can see we have our article here, that's our doc, and it's made up of a series of headers and paragraphs. We're going to be using the fact that those are in headers to build our outline. And then our outline is our aside over here. So I need to go get those two objects. I'm going to be using them a lot through this, so I'm going to go ahead and make variables that cover them. So var outline equals document get element by ID outline, and var source equals document get element by ID, and that's called doc. Okay. These are our two elements, our article and our aside, that we're going to be using throughout our project. To be able to use our nodes, you can get them. That's easy. But most of the time, we're going to be wanting to create new nodes. When you create a new node, you use the create element function, which we're going to use a ton in this project. So a lot of create elements that we're going to be using. You can create a comment if you want to add some comment directly to your DOM. You can create text nodes, which are just strings of text as opposed to specifically elements. You can also clone a node, which is copying it, or add your attributes. So create attributes directly with a given name. On the node side, once we've created our node, you need to be able to add it to the DOM. So just creating it and just having it in your hand doesn't help. You need to attach it to the DOM somehow. Most of the time, what we're going to do is have another element that we are going to append it to. Appending a node sets it as the last child of that node. So it will append it to the end of its children list. You can choose to put it in different places. So you can do an insert before to put it before a specific child, to say, I want to put this here in this position. You can also remove children as long as you have access to that node as an element, whether it's a variable or however you're accessing it, you can remove the child. You can also replace one node with another. And normalize is just the idea of it'll go through all of your nodes and it'll try to merge all of your text into a single text node if it can. So if you have 5 text nodes that all have one word in them each, it'll combine all of them into one string of 5 words. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and build our quick heading. So up at the top, it's going to say outline, and underneath it, it's going to have all of the options. So we need to build this concept. So when we build things, think about them as nested nodes. Each node has to go inside of itself. A node by itself does not have any text. You need to add text to a node. So we are going to start with our main heading. And that is going to be a document create element. And it's going to be an H1. Because I want to do an H1 element for it. Next, we're going to have our list. And it's going to start with our preamble starting with the top, and then it's going to move its way down. So this is the actual ordered list that we're going to be creating. So document create element, ordered list. Again, memorizing all of those tags is going to be really useful. Now our main heading doesn't have anything in it, so we need to get some text. So heading text, we are going to make a text node. Create text node. And inside that, we are going to use the word just outline. And that's going to be the top. That's going to be our heading text. Just building the elements does not build the elements. Really important for you to remember that. We need to actually append those to our DOM, to our main document. So I'm going to say, first off, my main heading needs to have the heading text put inside of it. Main heading, append child, and we're going to do the heading text. So I'm going to put the heading text inside as a child to the main heading. Okay, that'll be cool. Now I want to add the main heading to the outline. The outline, remember, this thing up here, not my outline list. I'm not there yet. So I'm going to say outline, append child, main heading. So my main heading holds the text, quote unquote, outline, and my outline now holds my main heading. Finally, I need to add my outline list as well. So outline, append child, outline list. Now, we've loaded, we've called make outline. Let's go see if it works. So if we come over here and we hit refresh, you should see that it says outline. And if I check my dev tools, here, I should find that, not there, I want my elements there. In my aside, I now have an H1 element that has the text outline, and I have an ordered list. There's nothing in the ordered list, so you can't see anything yet. But that's okay, we're gonna build that. So that's what we have just added. Once we have created our nodes, we can work with them. So the examples that I've given here are how to use a for loop to loop through your children. So if you have all of your children nodes, so your node dot children nodes, you can reference the individual children nodes. Most of the for loops we've done so far have only been integers. So far, I equals 0 and moved on from there. But you don't have to set that first variable to be an integer. You can set it to a node. So in the example, second example here, we have var n equals the first child of whatever my node is. And my incrementer is what is my next sibling. Really important part of this, make sure it says n equals the next sibling. If you just say n next sibling, that doesn't do anything. So you have to actually assign the variable n to be something new. The same way with I++, it makes I now one more. We have to make n the next sibling. And then our conditional, to make sure that we know when to stop, is when the next sibling is null, which means there are no more siblings. We've gone through all of our children. Nodes have three, they have a lot, but they have three specific properties that we want to reference. One is their type. What type of node is it? And you can reference it via a number. So if it's an element, an attribute, a text, a comment, or a document. You might have text nodes in there that are not elements. So recognizing that your node type is a text is kind of useful. We also have what is the name. This is going to give you the element name if you have a type of 1. So if you are an element, it'll give you your name. If you are not an element, it won't give you your name. It'll give you maybe your attribute name, or it might say the word text or comment or document. And this just tells you what is the name of that node itself. The last is the value. There is not a direct node value of elements. You have to go get the child of the element to get the value. So there'll be a text field or there'll be something inside of that element. That's the value. So really important when you get like an H1 tag. You can't get the node value of an H1 tag directly. That won't give you the text. You have to go get the child of the H1 tag and get his value because he's a text and he has string. You can do that. Same with comments. Documents return null, and attributes have the attribute and their value. So really important to be able to access those. You can also use the index of with an element to find what index the element exists at. What this is asking, and we're going to do this in our code, is specifically where in the list of whatever I'm looking at does this element exist. So if I have a list, like we're going to do in our project of headers, this is going to say, where in the list of headers do I exist? If it doesn't exist, the result is -1. It isn't null, it's -1. So you can check against the value of -1 to make sure that that value exists. At this point, we're going to create our create list function. So this function is going to go ahead and do all the work of building our outline for us. we're going to make a function called createList. And it is going to take both our source document and our outline document, or outline elements inside of it. When we create our list, we are going to walk through our different nodes inside of our source document until we find headers. When we find those headers, we are going to take the text out of the header and add it to our outline list. The source document will stay the same. We're not changing any of that. We're just pulling some information out of it. To do this, we are going to need a for loop that's going to loop through all of our node elements. So to do that, we are going to do a for loop. We're going to set our variable n equal to our source dot first child. So the first child from our source. Okay. Our incrementer is going to be setting the variable n equal to n's next sibling. When we look at our children nodes, we want the sibling that comes after it. We don't want his child, we want his siblings. So we want everybody that's at the same level as him. We are going to continue to do this as long as n is not equal to null. So that is our base for loop for walking through our different nodes. To be able to check against headers, we need an array of headers. So we are going to make a variable of headings, and we're going to make them an array. Okay, this is kind of important, similar to our RGB. We need our headings to be capitalized because in the DOM, when they are built, doesn't matter if you put them with a lowercase h or an uppercase h, they will get capitalized, and the actual node name is going to be a capital letter. So if you keep them as a lowercase letter, if you did a lowercase h1, that's not going to work. They have to be capital letters. Okay, back into our for loop. So we're inside of our for loop. We know what our node is. We need to see if our node exists inside of our heading list. So is the node one of the headings? If it's a paragraph, we can ignore it. So I need to find our head level. So which level? So is it an H1 or an H2 or an H3, or if it's a -1. So I'm going to say headings index of, which index exists. Okay, this is where I'm checking my n, my node value, and I'm going to check the node name. The name is going to give me what type of node is it, which element. Is it an H1? Is it an H2? Is it a paragraph? Is it an aside? Is it a what? So what is that node name? If this node name comes back as a paragraph, head level is going to be -1. If it comes back as an aside, it's going to come back as -1. If it comes back as something else, it's going to be -1. The only things that are going to come back positive are going to be our H1 through H6. Now H1 will return 0, but it's still positive, it's 0, through H6. So H6 would return 5 because it's in the fifth index of my headings. Okay. Now I know that I need to do something if my head level is not equal to -1. Because if it's -1, that means it didn't find a heading. I only want to deal with headings here. Once we get into our head level, we're going to go ahead and create the list element that goes into our actual outline. The list element is going to be creating an LI. Well, that's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to do a var list element, and it's going to equal a document, create element, and it's going to create an LI. Because it's a list item that's going to go inside of our ordered list that we created up over here. So we have our list element. From our list element, we want to add some text because right now it doesn't say anything, so it's kind of useless. So I'm going to do my list element, and I'm going to add my inner HTML. I'm going to get that text from my node. So my node has a text element inside of it. It's its first child of a header. So we are going to say, what's the first child of you? Where's your text element? And then with your first child, I want to know what the value is. The node value is going to be the text, the actual string that goes along with the text element inside of your node. Cool. So now I made my list element. My list element has some text inside of it. Now I need to add that list element to my outline. So we're going to do outline, append child, and we're going to do our list element is going to be appended. Okay. We haven't actually called create list yet. We built our function, but we haven't done anything with it. This is going to run through a for loop that's going to check all of the children here in the source, make sure that we know which ones are headings. If the heading level is greater than -1, which means that it's one of these 6 headings, then it's going to create a list element for that item, add the text, and append it. But we still need to call it. So we're going to come back up here to our make outline. Remember, that was our event handler for our onload. And we're going to call create list. I'm going to add in our source and our outline. Okay, let's see what happens. All right, so you can see what it did was it took all of the headings and added them all to my outline list. Each one of the ones here that was created with an H element. So whether it was the preamble, Articles of the Constitution, Article 1, Article or Section 1, so on and so forth, all of those got added. Hopefully that started you with your project and kind of was pretty exciting to be able to see that work. Let's come back for session 2 and we'll keep going and finishing up our outline.